So that's a little bit on the idea side. Lately, again, as Deborah described, we've been fighting our own battle of the Nile. I would say battles of the Nile since 2008. And I think you're all very, very aware of this. There are a number of things going on in the world. So one, we've got a macroeconomic situation unlike anything we've faced in many, many decades. And what I have here is a series of curves. And the yellow and green lines, the two that are sort of the sharpest turning, that's typically what happens in a recession, either in a so-called V recovery or a U-shaped recovery. And it's what happens to labor. So, you know, if you go back to 2008 and you start, you know, with the amount of people who were employed, obviously as we got to the depth of the recession in 2009, there were, you know, unemployment went up. In most cycles, that recovery only takes 18 to 24 months. You can see the dotted lines. These are the various scenarios that our chief economist has painted, which show that we're not likely to recover to anything close to structural full unemployment to 2014. I would tell you the betting is it's going to be closer to 2016, 2017. That's a scary thing. Okay, that's a scary thing. This is the single number one biggest problem with what's going on in the economy. So all the things you read about stimulus programs and, you know, the Fed doing this and the Fed doing that, until we address the labor issue and get more people working, you're not going to see the kind of recovery at a macroeconomic level that needs to occur. Again, maybe in the Q&A session we can go deeper on that if you'd like. You know, the second sort of related battle is what's going on in the markets. And this is a chart of stock market volatility. And what you notice is several very large peaks. There's a peak right before 2000, the so-called Asian contagion. And what I mean by stock market volatility, this is when you see big swings in the daily prices of stocks. You see the tech bubble, which we all remember, sort of the internet bubble. And then things actually got very calm after the internet bubble for a number of years, and people actually were starting to feel pretty good about the markets again. And then we had the global financial crisis. And then recently we've had a huge spike up in volatility. And again, for those of you who are interested in the history of the markets, August of this past 2011, we had 4 days in a row where the market moved plus or minus 400 points in a day. It's the first time in history that's ever happened. Okay, first time in history. So August, by some measures, is one of the most volatile periods on record. It doesn't quite get to the overall volatility of the heart of the crisis in 2008, but we're living in it right now. And what's interesting, and something that we're paying a lot of attention to, is so much of it seems tied to the macro economy. Often the markets and the economy diverge. There have been periods when the economy's been very weak and stock markets have fabulous returns. There have been periods when the economy's booming and the stock market actually has anemic returns. There's actually a pretty low correlation when you look back over the last 100 years. But what we're seeing right now is really strong correlation between macroeconomic news and the way the market reacts either up or down. The other thing that really seems to be impacting this volatility is, I'd say, the third battle, and these are all very much interrelated, and that's headlines. There's just an incredible amount of short-term information being thrown at people, and right now it's mostly negative. Okay? It's mostly negative. So if I were to tell you that in a fairly conservative portfolio over the last decade, with the tech wreck that I just showed and the crisis in 2008 and the volatility that's been reintroduced recently, that you could have earned about 6.5%. Inflation's about 2%, so that's a 4.5% real return. Not a great return by historical standards, but not a bad 10-year return. You'd probably say not possible. Okay, not possible. Stock market's basically even over the last decade. But actually, if you were a balanced fund investor, if you were in a 60-40 or a 65-35 stock bond portfolio, that's about what you would have earned. And so through all this noise, all this volatility, if you were balanced and diversified, you actually came out okay. I have yet to read that story. Okay? Instead, I read consumer confidence at a 2-year low. Middle East unrest. And these are all really, these are very serious issues, but it's all short-term oriented. And so part of, I think, what's going on out there in the marketplace is a lot of short-termism as opposed to people stepping back and trying to create a little bit longer-term perspective. And I think you see that also in the way policymakers are reacting and the way politicians are reacting and so forth. It seems like a battle of headlines as opposed to a battle of, sort of longer-term stuff. So with that all as backdrop, I want to use this as a way to, I guess, contrast how to think about strategy.